Well, hey there, Changemakers. Welcome to the Dare to Begin Small and Mighty podcast. I'm your host, Amy Van Meel, and I'm here to inspire and teach changemakers like you, entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs, and people who are doing big things in the world, some tips, tricks, things about business, and we're doing some personal growth on the way. With that, let's dive into today's topic. Well, hey there, Changemakers. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Dare to Begin Small and Mighty podcast. If this is your first time listening, hello there. Welcome. I'm excited that you're here, and I trust that you will find lots of great information inside the podcast. I'm really excited that you're here. And for those of you who've been with me for a while, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate your support. So I'm looking forward to today's episode because today's episode is really about making the shift. So when you are, and look, all of us, pretty much all of us, start this way. We start with a job and we are either working a job while we're building the business, or we have been laid off from or left a job right before we go to start a business, right? But most people who are around, most adults, have a job or have had a job at some point in their life. So what I want to talk about with you guys today is making the shift from employee to entrepreneur. And I'm excited about the topic because it's something that I think needs to be talked about a bit more. I see entrepreneurs struggling with thinking still like an employee, which is really can be very detrimental to your business when you're thinking in that way. So I am going to dive into the topic here in just a second, and I just want to say I am really excited. So this time next week is my guy's birthday, which I love birthdays. That's something that you probably don't know about me unless you're in my friend network. Birthdays are my jam. I love birthdays. And then immediately after his birthday, I am actually flying to San Francisco on an all expenses paid trip from one of my design suppliers. I'm so excited. I'm going with one of my very favorite reps, and she's become a very good friend of mine. So we're going to spend, I think it's 3 days in San Francisco. We're going to be there for Design Week. So if you're tuning in from San Francisco, give me a tag in the Instagram so you can find me at I Dare to Begin and let me know, hey, like I love doing this thing in San Francisco. We're also looking for a great place to eat. So keep that in mind. Let me know like your favorite restaurant in the San Fran area. All right, so let's get into today's topic where we're talking about, I always say we as if it's the royal we, you know, it's like when you and your guy are like, we cleaned the house this weekend, and you're like, I cleaned the house this weekend. So the royal we're going to jump into today's topic where I want to talk with you guys about making the shift from employee to entrepreneur. So I gave you a little heads up already in the sense that I see a lot of entrepreneurs really struggling with this. And the truth is I was in this mindset as well. It wasn't until, I can't remember where I heard it, but someone in my, realm of influence had talked about the idea that a lot of entrepreneurs go into business, go into entrepreneurship with an employee mindset. And I'm going to give you 5 simple things that you can do right now in your job. So while you're still working that j.o.b, you can make that work for you guys. So we're going to talk about that here. But it's really important if you are wanting to step away from having, the regular 9 to 5 where you're reporting into someone else, it's important to make the mental shift from an employee to an entrepreneur. Because the truth is, you need to think differently when you not only step into a business, but when you step into a business as the owner, you are a leader. And if you're like me, you've never ever stayed in a job long enough to ever make it to a management position. The last job I had, I remember them saying most managers, if you haven't had any other of their, so-called management level requirements, you're in like a basic position for 4 years before you could even start moving up into like the next level. And I'm like, 4 years? are you freaking crazy? I'm not staying at a job that's like this for 4 years. So yeah, I never stayed with a job long enough to actually make it to management, which is totally fine because, sometimes our lives go in different ways. And the cool thing is that whether or not I had management level training or management level experience, I have always known that I'm a leader inside, which is probably why it's frustrated me to have a job. And probably why I never stayed in a job long enough to actually make it there. Anyway, we're not here to talk about my work history, but I want to talk about thinking about where you are right now. It doesn't matter what your job is. I don't care if you're a French fry cook at McDonald's, but when you are at a job, so businesses are operating all the time in different frameworks and structures that they set up. And the really cool thing is that while you're at your j.o.b, you can begin to observe and learn from that business. I didn't realize that I was doing this. For years I've done this. I remember my first fantastic job out of university. I worked at a lighting store and I really enjoyed it. I loved working with the customers that came in. But I was always paying attention to how management handled situations, how the owner scheduled his day, how things ran, what could go better, what do they do that's really working. And I did that for every job I'd ever been at. Now, I was also frustrated because a lot of the bigger jobs, I'm like, okay, this isn't working. We need to change it up, which is why I love entrepreneurship, because you have the freedom to do that, right? You don't necessarily have either the freedom or the sway to affect change like that especially if you're in a big company. I find that big companies are very slow to move. And for those of you with that entrepreneur mindset, with that, that willingness to change what isn't working and try and test, that becomes very frustrating for us. And I totally get it. I've been there. So the first step in making that shift from the employee to the entrepreneur is really to observe what's happening, what's working, and what's not working. So just think about a bird's eye view of the business that you're in. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're high level executive in some big multinational company or if you're a fry cook at your local diner. It really doesn't matter. You want to really pay attention to what's happening in the day-to-day. What do you see that works really well? Do they have a really good system for scheduling employees? Do they have a great system for handling customer complaints, right? Look at what's really working very well in the business. And most people have no trouble with the next one to see what's not working. Now, as humans, we are conditioned to complain, and it's something that I don't like, and it's something that I am very aware of. If there's people who are big complainers in my realm, I tend to not spend time with those people because, first of all, complaining does not ever affect change, and it just brings everybody down. But when you're in a job, what you'll find often, and this is true for every job I've ever held, is that people are always complaining about what's not working. So in terms of observing, that's an easy one to see of what's not working. But I want you to go a little level different or deeper. Okay, so number 2, the second step is to begin to look for ways that you could improve what's not working. And here's where you start to think if this were my business, how would I solve this situation? What would I do differently? And the great thing is, so first of all, you're not in charge, which means that you don't have all of the mental weight and stress of that business being on your shoulders, which allows your brain to really think openly and freely about some options. It's a fantastic way to start to stretch and practice those entrepreneurial muscles, because now you can go, okay, you're in a totally risk-free environment, right? You're in a job. The responsibility is not yours, but now you can start going, okay, this really isn't working. The employees aren't happy, the customers aren't happy, whatever. We're throwing away food, or we're not being smart with our supplies, whatever it is, and then think about, well, how would I do it differently? How would I improve on this? What would that look like? And start to really think about that. It's a fantastic exercise. Like I said, it will really get you going into thinking more like an owner, like an entrepreneur. And it'll become a fantastic tool for you when you actually are in your own business. And if you're in your own business right now, if you don't have a j.o.b, and so you can't necessarily observe from like the bird's eye view because you're in it, you're in the trenches, then practice taking that bird's eye view in your business right now. So if there's something that's not working, take a step back, which I know is a challenge because as entrepreneurs, especially when we're getting started, I totally feel you there. We are in it. It is our blood, sweat, and tears that's in it. And so it can be really difficult to take that step back and go, okay, I need a high level view here. This is why things like mastermind groups or accountability partners can be so powerful because they're not invested in the business, so they can see things differently. So try it, take yourself out of your office. That's a big one. Get yourself out of your normal working space, whether it's you go for a walk or you go for a bike ride, or if you're like me and you live near the mountains, head out to the mountains, but take yourself mentally out of the space and physically out of the space where you're working every day. And that will allow you to get a better understanding of what's not working. All right. Then number 3, now this is important if you're in a job. If you're not in a job, you can't do this. But number 3, if possible, ask the owner why they started. And I want to really, really, really nail this point. So pay close attention here. Your job is to listen more than you talk. Your goal here is to learn what drives the owner, what lit the fire underneath them to get going. Now, it can be, you don't have to let the business owner know like that or your boss, let's say, you don't have to let them know that you're wanting to start a business. You don't have to say any of those things, especially if you're thinking it's going to put you at risk of losing your job. You just want to let them know you're really curious about why they started, what made them want to do this, what was their motivation behind it. If they grew the business quite big, then how did they overcome obstacles? What were some of the biggest things that they had to overcome at the beginning? And what kept them going when things got tough? So those are like if you have a job and you can have access to the owner of the business, it's a fantastic opportunity to really learn and draw on the knowledge from someone who's been there before. And chances are, if you still have a job, the business is doing relatively well, right? Now, it may not be, total robust business depending on how the economy is in your area, but there's a good chance that if it's still hiring employees or it still has people working for it, that the business is doing reasonably well. So it's good to ask the business owner just their experiences and their knowledge, their insights, find out why they got into it. I'm always curious about this. So when I go to networking events, even though technically you're not supposed to ask, what do you do? I always want to know what do you do because I'm so curious how people spend their time and why they started it. I've had fascinating conversations with accountants and board members and like different careers, different businesses that the truth is I would find dreadfully boring. But when you dig into why someone actually wanted to do that, it's always fascinating. So use the opportunity that you have and just have a chat with the business owner and just real quick, be respectful. Don't just walk into their office and be like, hey, I have some questions for you. Let them know that you'd love to pick their brain a little bit about why they started and ask them if you could set aside, 15 or 20 minutes with them one day to talk about it. So you want to be respectful of their time in that way. Then number 4, this is really, really key, especially if you're starting a business in a similar industry. If it is a similar industry that your business is going to be in as the job that you're working right now, then think about what will you do differently. All right? When I worked for a design company back in Manitoba years ago. And while I love the design work, I loved working with the clients, that was the worst boss I'd ever had in my life. I mean, she was atrocious, and it didn't end well, which is really not surprising in hindsight. But what I did every day, because I enjoyed the opportunity to do the design work, I enjoyed the opportunity to work with the clients, but I could see on the daily, like the crap that she was doing, stuff that was literally downright illegal. I watched very carefully and said, okay, if this were my business, what would I do differently? And it's a great way, again, for you to learn from a situation that you're in right now, but it will also help you step into that entrepreneurial mind of like, okay, when I have a business, I would like to, whatever it is. For me, it's always been, I know it's silly, but I told you at the front that I'm a big fan of birthdays. For me, my goal has always been that when I bring on team members, that their birthday is always a paid day off. Doesn't count towards the holidays, doesn't count as a sick day, nothing else, just a paid day off. I love birthdays. I think they should be celebrated. I don't care how old you are, how young you are. The truth is, if you're having a birthday, it's a great thing, because as I remind my friends when they're like, I don't want to celebrate the fact that I just turned 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever. I'm like, well, the alternative to having a birthday ain't so great. So better celebrate it, because if you don't, who knows? You might not be here for the next one, right? So for me, I've always wanted to have that in place for my team, for my employees. So as they come on, as I start to onboard some staff, then that will be something that will be included. That it's not even a negotiable. It's just like, it's your birthday, you're getting the day off with pay. Thanks, have an amazing day. Do whatever you want, right? So if you're like I said, if your business is going to be in a similar industry to the job you're working right now, think about what you will do differently. And you can make some notes, or you can just like noodle around on it in your head. Now, if it's going to be in an unrelated industry, for example, if right now you're a fry cook at your local diner and you want to start a life coaching business, they are not the same industry, very obviously. So then what you can do is you can see what useful practices you could borrow to overlay into your business. This is really good, especially when the industries are not the same. So if you're doing a job right now, but you're going to do something totally different, what can you borrow from the job, from the industry that you're working in right now, that you think would overlay beautifully into your business? Right? Again, this is all about moving yourself out of this employee mindset of, I can't affect change, I have no control here, whatever, into, okay, if I were the owner, what would it look like? And in this case, what useful practices can you borrow for your business? Maybe there's systems in place in the job that you have right now which work really well. Whether it's like scheduling employees or dealing with issues, whatever it is, there could be systems in place that work really well. So start making note of those and say, okay, how would this look to overlay this into the business that I want to start? Right? It's a fantastic opportunity to learn from where you are. So I highly recommend that you do that. Now, finally, number 5 is it's just simple. It's making the mental shift from employee to business owner. Now, the great thing is that all the way through, all the 4 steps before this have been you practicing making that shift already, right? Like we've talked about observing what works, and then how would you do things differently, and what could you borrow? So you're already making the mental shift from an employee to an entrepreneur. And it's important that you really work that muscle or group of muscles. There could be like 100 in there. I don't know. You want to really focus on growing that strength even while you're in your j.o.b. Because even though it's frustrating, look, guys, I get it. I've been there. It's so frustrating to have the mind of an entrepreneur and the drive of an entrepreneur and working for someone else, especially when it's a big company that isn't willing to change, or you have a boss who's like a tyrant like mine was, and there's just no opportunity for growth or improvement. It can be really frustrating. I get it. But what you're doing right now is you're training yourself for what's to come. And the beauty of it is, as you begin to make that shift, even though it will feel a little bit frustrating while you're still going to work and punching the time clock every day, when you finally launch into your business, or if you're, working your business on the side right now, when you get to the point of being able to run your business full time, you're going to be laughing. You're going to be so far ahead of so many people that aren't taking the time to practice this, that aren't using the opportunity that's in front of them to say, okay, how would this look? What would be different? How can I start to think like an entrepreneur? So I mentioned earlier that this is something that I only became aware of really, I think, a couple of years ago. And what happened was I knew that I was constantly bumping up against some invisible barrier, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I'm like, something's happening here and I can't quite figure it out. And then wherever it was that I heard it, that this person said basically, there's so many entrepreneurs that still think like employees, and alarm bells went off in my head, and I was like, that's it. That's the one tiny key that just literally unlocked a flood of doors that just immediately made it all make sense. And since then, I've been paying attention, and because I don't have a job anymore at the moment, right? I have my two businesses. What I've been able to do is look back at all the jobs that I've had and gone, okay, I can see now why that was really frustrating, or I can see that worked really well, or, whatever. So it gives you that bird's eye view, but in the past. So if you're already gone from a job and you're like, Amy, I don't have a job anymore to observe, you have your past experience to draw on. So you can definitely, use that history looking bird's eye view and go back and say, okay, now I see why this really frustrated me, or, oh yeah, I remember now when I was there, they did this really well, right? You want to start making that shift from the employee to the business owner. And if you're in a job right now, start making the shift. If you've already left in your full-time in your business, then definitely ask the same questions. Focus on it as well. If you have a partner or a friend that has a job, it's a fantastic opportunity for you to observe what they're doing as well. So when my guy comes home and he's talking about the business, and he'll talk about, things that work really well in his office, or things that he finds that head office they don't do well, I'm always paying attention. I mean, I'm obviously listening to what he's telling me, but I'm also paying attention to, okay, so when they do this, the employees don't like it. Or when this happens, the customers aren't getting the best from the staff, right? So you can, if you don't have a job right now, you can also listen very closely and observe what others are telling you. Now, I want to leave you with this, and then we're going to close off today's podcast. So very many people, a lot of people who start a business begin with an employee mindset of, I got to put in the hours, I'm not doing all this extra stuff if I'm not getting paid, or I just want to have more vacation. So many business owners are like, I want time freedom. I want to be able to take time off whenever I want to. And let me tell you, friends, it's fantastic to be the person who gets to schedule your time. It's also a huge responsibility. And when you don't have a job, when you're the owner, there ain't no holiday time. So when you take time away, it's time away. So I'm not trying to scare you, but that's what a lot of employees think that. And then they get into a business and go, well, that's not quite the same. The first few vacations I had when I started my business were really stressful, actually, because I'm like, well, this is great for you. My guy still had a job. Like, you're on holiday time, but I'm away and I ain't making no money right now. So think about that. And then I want you to remember this. When you're starting a business, you are the visionary. You're the captain of the ship the maker of the map, the builder of the rocket. While you start, you'll be wearing all the hats and doing all the things. Just watch that you don't get stuck in the mindset and replace a job you hate with a business that feels like a job. All right? That is so key. I want to leave you guys with that today to really make sure that you don't replace a job that you hate with a business that feels like a job. I trust that today's episode gave you tons of good insight. Please share on the Instagrams. Like I said, you can find me at I Dare to Begin. Take yourself a screen capture and post it up in your stories and make sure you tag me in it. I love to share the love. And I post about each podcast episode on the Instagrams. So just leave a comment on the post as well and say, hey, Amy, I really love this episode. This was really powerful to me, whatever. And definitely, if you're listening on the iTunes, please leave me a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate it. I cannot walk you through. I love to tell people like steps how to do it, but you'll figure it out. You guys are smart people. I trust you. I believe in you. All right. I am so looking forward to catching up with you next week. So next week, we're going to have a little celebration because the podcast comes out on my guy's birthday. And like I said, I really love birthdays. And then I'm off to San Francisco. So I wish you a fantastic week. I'm so looking forward to connecting with you then. And I just want to say have an amazing day. Bye for now.